Okay, I'm back. I realized forcing you to watch me mess with a sphere is kind of dumb. So I stuck a head in here, at least a little more interesting, something to look at while I'm showing you what some of these things do. Okay, so that's the change from the last video to this one. Anyway, we've kind of covered this stuff up here. Brushes. Okay, so the brushes are accessed by either clicking on this icon up here, or holding, or just tapping on the B key, like so. And you see there's a lot of brushes. ZBrush has an immense amount of brushes, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So in order to manage how you can actually pick a brush without having to, bury your head in this list every time, what they've done is, if you hit the B key, you get this brush menu. Then the first letter of the category of brush you're looking for. So let's say I'm looking for the move brush, okay? So if I hit, I'll just get out of here, B and then M, okay? What that does is limit all these brushes to the ones that start with the letter M, okay? And then you'll see there's another letter next to these in orange here. And what that is the third letter you can pick to quickly grab that brush. Okay, so let's try that again. B, M, and V is the move brush. And you'll see up here, I now have this brush, okay, up here. And that's actually a brush you're going to use all the time because it lets you move geometry, okay, without actually sculpting it, okay? So you can make this guy look very different. Frumpy. Angry. Oh, look, his teeth are poking out. Nice. Okay, his teeth are a separate subtool here. So this is a great time to show you the undo thing. Yeah, there we go. Undo slider. Okay, so that's how you access brushes, okay, with the B key or just by clicking on this. And you'll also notice that there's a setup here of quick brushes. Those are ones you've been using recently, and they're going to show up in this top row. So you don't have to bury, you have to scroll through all this stuff all the time to do so. You can find them right up at top here. So I'm going to go back to the standard brush. Okay. Underneath the brushes is the type of stroke that the brush that's selected is using. Okay. So this is the brush. This is the stroke for this particular brush. That is the dots stroke. Okay. And when you see a straight line here with these guys, what you're actually creating is a series of little dots right next to each other, okay? But they blend together so that they appear to be a single thing, all right? You can smooth these strokes out, I think I mentioned that before, by holding down the Shift key, like so. Okay, let's get rid of that. So there are different types of strokes that might be more or less useful depending on the kind of brush and what you're trying to do with it, and that'll come into play when I show you the alpha here in the next section. Okay, so stroke, most of the time you're going to be using dots, freehand, or this drag rectangle. These are primarily for color, okay, when you're painting. And then this guy, this drag dot, is actually another sort of brush, or I'm sorry, stroke, where you can drag whatever you're looking at around, and when you let it go, it will place that particular shape on there, okay? So back to dots. This third section down here is the alpha. And alpha is how a lot of brushes are actually constructed. They're used or developed with a certain mask, okay, a black and white mask, and it can be grayscale. It doesn't need to be just black or white. It can have varying levels of gray in order to create transitions. So for instance, if I grab this alpha 60 here, like this, and I'll just zoom in on this a little bit, and just drag this. Oh, I have my intensity up to 100 here. That's not great. All right, let me set that back to the default, which is 25. Okay, so if I drag that out like that, you can kind of see what that does. Okay, scars, scrapes, scratches, things like that. And I'll divide this guy one more time here. So for instance, if I wanted to put some wrinkles under his eye, for instance. By the way, I'm getting this draw size over here by just tapping the S key, as you'll see on the screen, and then I can just drag this and it stays there until you drag that little slider. Okay, so if I change this intensity to something very low, and if I hold down the Option key to push in and rather than go out, you can kind of see, you know, what that does. All right, so give this guy a few little wrinkles, laugh lines, things like that. Okay, and by the way, I'm drawing with a mouse right now, so pardon the lack of subtlety in these strokes. When I use a tablet, which is why I think you should get a tablet. It's much easier to taper and kind of control the stroke, because how hard you push will affect this intensity. Okay, so you can get some quick results with that without having to try to draw with a block of wood here like I'm doing. Okay, let me just knock those out so you can kind of see what those do. Okay, so alphas are a really big deal, and alphas don't have to be like this, where they're sort of a linear, sketchy kind of thing. They can also be something more graphic. Okay, for instance, this guy. So if I take this, and I'm still at 3.5 million polys, and change this from stroke to drag rectangle, it's essentially putting a single instance of the alpha inside a rectangle that you drag, like this. Okay, so you can kind of see what that does. And again, if I crank that intensity up more, by the way, I have symmetry on right now. Okay, so you're seeing these two little dots, and that's actually controlled up under the transform menu. And you can toggle it on and off by hitting the X key. It has nothing to do with which part of symmetry is on. That's just the key command. Okay, but when you put them together, you'll see they kind of snap to the middle. That means you're right in the middle, and what you're going to get is just a single instance. Okay, like that. Okay, so our little Android-y guy here, suddenly. Okay, so when you do something like this, and you'll see when I turned this, or when I was actually drawing, it gets kind of low res while you're doing it. That's because it's trying to give you instant feedback. So when your computer can't keep up with it, and very few can keep up with 3.5 million while you're drawing something, it's going to go low res. And that's actually pretty good, but when I move it, see how that kind of gets knocked down into giant pixelated things? It comes back as soon as you let go. Okay, like so. And the way I'm moving this is just anywhere outside the model I can use to move around. Okay, and it just spins on its axis here, like so, like that. While you're doing that, if you hold down the Shift key, it will snap to front, side, top, bottom, like so. You can also access that by this little guy right up here. Okay, you can drag this like that, and it'll snap to incremental views. Okay, and you can always use these little guys, these little arrows as well, to flip from front to back, top, left, right, back to front. Okay, I'm just going to undo this stuff like so. Okay, I'm going to set that back to wherever I was. This was dots. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, texture. Okay, so you can paint with textures, and you can use textures as masks as well. All sorts of things you can do with that. We'll talk about that as we get going a little bit more. But just as an example, if I took this texture right here and turned on RGB up here, okay, I can turn off sculpting, okay, and I can actually then paint with that, okay, like so. And likewise, if I wanted to just a single instance of that with this drag rectangle, I can put that right here and drag that out. And he has a lovely colored target on his forehead. That's probably not a great thing to do. Okay. Anyway, get the idea. So you can paint with that. Similarly, you can paint with color. Okay. So if I were to, do something here with color, you can also paint. Okay. So I'm going to turn this off, turn my sculpting back on, and now I'm back to this. Okay, get back to here, like so. Okay, materials right here. If you click on that, you can see there are a number of materials in here. And these can be used when you're trying to render something, okay, when you're making a finished image, not sculpting it anymore, not working on it. And they're also useful for kind of giving you an idea of what something might look like when you're working on it, like if it were, so let's say something more, chromy looking, that kind of thing. Sometimes these things really help you gauge the actual sculpting and the shapes of the model, okay? And that's a big deal because it's hard to see sometimes what something looks like unless it has a particular kind of light on it or a reflection on it, that kind of thing, all right? So it is going to give you a different feel. Most of the time, when I'm working, I use this Skin Shade 4, which is basically just kind of a pretty bright white. A lot of people will use these kind of more pearlescent-y looking skin shaders as well. And they don't look anything like skin, but they're particularly lit in a particular way that helps you see where light and shadow is falling on this when you're sculpting. And that's really what these materials excel at. Okay, anyway, there they are. There are two types, standard materials and matte cap materials. Matte caps essentially have the light built into the material, okay, as opposed to these guys which don't. So they are affected by light in different ways, and there are lights in ZBrush as well that we'll talk about later on, okay? Okay, color, I think I talked about that a little bit. Again, if I pull this down to where this red thing is and turn this on, turn this off, I can then paint with this, okay? And again, if I had a tablet, it would be much more, useful to do. You'll see that in the background, the eyes and things are changing color, and that's a particular issue. Essentially, before you can paint on something and make it actually stick, you have to fill it with a color, okay? And in this case, it's kind of auto-filling with whatever color I pick. So where you do that is up here under Color, Fill Object, okay? And again, we'll get into that a little bit more later. Gradient is this between black and white, and this is just my main color right here. You can also click black or white here to pick colors, okay, too. So no biggie. Switch color, that's what it does there. Switch, doop, like so. Okay, so that's these little guys right here. This up here is a new addition, and it's essentially, it is a silhouette of your model without any color or any light on it. Okay, so again, kind of like with the materials, when you're sculpting something, you want to know what the form looks like, okay? And you can get kind of intoxicated by the sculpt and kind of miss the fact that the proportions are way off or other things are not quite right. This little thing really gives you an idea of what this is looking like. And if you've ever taken animation or studied anything like that, it's all about the silhouette. You should be able to tell what something is doing when you're animating by its silhouette, okay? Which is why you rarely see animation, at least cartoon animation, with arms in towards the body and things like that. All these expressive elements are done with the limbs so that they read well as a silhouette, okay? Okay, that's this little guy, this little row down here, okay? So I'm gonna stop this one and we'll come back for more in a moment, okay?